I don't know either. Meredy, I'm doing this for you. Where are you? Little cut and pasting. Right. Okay. I'm really delighted to be here. Nervous, but delighted to participate with you, seniors, in this ceremony. This rite of passage is strengthened by everyone here in the audience. Thank you all for joining us. When Willem asked me, surely after all these years you have some nugget or two that you'd be willing to share for our graduates, I paused, looking at him out in the parking lot. How could my words be worthy of these graduates, their parents, their teachers? How could words possibly capture this gratitude that I feel? It's an impossible task. Let's just say that at the beginning. Plus, after all these years in education, gazillions of more questions. Like, how do we build and sustain a school whose founder defied most norms of education? What would an intelligent response to this statement of Krishnamurti's be? Quote, "There's no way that thought can find an answer to the human problem. Thought created the problem." So, though I've spent half of my life here, it was not easy for me to narrow the scope of the vast possibilities of this field called education. Frankly, I became a bit obsessed. Looking at the big pictures, big questions, Krishnamurti's life, 42 years, my life, the seniors' lives. What metaphor would connect all these pieces? Plus, half a life spent over in Minneapolis, in the traditional schooling world, and the other 4 decades, or nearly 4 decades, here in this revolutionary school. So for a long time while I was trying to write the speech, I enjoyed the riddle of not knowing where it was heading. Heaps of papers and books in my office represented the messy, imperfect world of education, with its undertones of potential wholeness, brightness, and light. Periodically, my husband would peek in to ask, "How's it going? Do you have a draft to read to me yet?" "No, I'm still assembling things. It's only early May." He'd shake his head with that look of foreboding. "From the looks of it, there's no funnel wide enough to capture nor narrow enough to distill what you're trying to brew up." Bless his heart. He helped me to begin narrowing the field. He drafted a few paragraphs which have been woven throughout. Thank you, love. You've always backed me up. So, I've sketched out a few snapshots to share the panorama of values and conditioning from the Midwest. Let's start at the beginning. The Midwest during the 1950s and 60s, where mantras like "don't fight, be good, obey your teachers, mind your manners, what will the neighbors think?" they could be heard around every dinner table in my neighborhood. One day, my best friend Phyllis told me that I should come to her church on Sunday. She didn't want me to go to hell. I said, why would I go to hell? She said, "Well, I learned that my church is the one true church and yours isn't." So this was an affront to my Lutheran sensibilities. Even though I was only 8, still, I was a good Lutheran little girl. Maybe for those of you who know Garrison Keillor's Lake Wobegon, don't you know? You kind of know the story about Pastor Inkfest, right? So this just didn't sit right with me. And though I asked an authority on such matters, my Sunday school teacher, it was never resolved in my mind. Sketch 2. We baby boomers enjoyed the fruits of our parents' physical prosperity, but we also inherited their reluctance to discuss feelings or question authority. Though my parents witnessed World War II, They never discussed it with my brothers and me. Later, during the Cold War years, we would huddle silently together in our neighbor's backyard root cellar turned bomb shelter, practicing a bomb drill. We never talked about what might happen. It didn't sit right with me. Sketch 3. When I reflect on my high school in the 1960s, I see that we played mostly in the shallows. The shallows of fitting in, looking good, smiling though our hearts were breaking, dating jocks, painting posters, and pretending. Schoolwork was irrelevant, boring, and rote. Curiosity about life's deeper waters were rare. 4. We watched the astronauts plant the United States flag on the moon in 1969. Later, I remember Martin Luther King's potent question, on what scale of progress is going to the moon? Something's sitting right with me. I started teaching in 1970. Overwhelmed. My first day of class, 42 fifth graders. The principal's main message to all the children assembled after the summer break that first day of school was that this is the best school in the city. And he got us chanting together about our bestness. I don't remember what the words were, but it didn't sit well. I wondered, why would a certified smart person, such as a principal, want to instill such false spirit of superiority? Of course I kept the question to myself. Side note. I recall a joke going around the school a few years ago when someone suggested, I think it might have been Merity, that the school ought to sell a bumper sticker, and it would say, Oak Grove School, the best non-competitive school in the valley. So another sketch, my last. I read The Giving Tree to my nieces, a highly recommended and popular book at the time. Everybody familiar with The Giving Tree? Well, a lot of you. As you may recall, the little boy and the tree love each other, and the boy climbs and swings and plays in the shade of that tree. But as an adult, he returns. He demands money, he demands lumber, and then the boat, and so the poor tree, gone, a stump. What about mutual respect? This is a children's book. What about reciprocity? The boy never even planted the tree. With each of these sketches, I'm just trying to illustrate something that we all share as human beings. That at some random point in our lives, we're lucky to realize the absurdities of conditioning. Absurdities of conditioning that exist all around us and within us. These sketches of my early life, the bomb shelter, the moon, the flag, they all point to the universality of day-to-day conditioning forces. And one might say, well, what's the big deal about condition? We're all conditioned. That's the point. We're all conditioned. And it has something that takes a toll. Look at the toll that it's taking in our current world situation. This is exciting stuff. And when Willem asked me for a couple nuggets, remember at the beginning, he said, can you give me a couple nuggets? I said, well, how about if these sketches that I just sketched out are the nuggets? Moments in life when things don't sit well, right? They don't feel right. There's an intuition, an insight, a flutter in your stomach. A nugget can be an unsettled feeling, a noticing, something that doesn't make sense. So unlike Our graduates, our current graduates, I lack the confidence in myself and the encouragement and support from others to ask questions that might have helped me unravel some of these confusions and discomforts that I just described. And I kept noticing the unsettled quality when something didn't sit right, when something absurd occurred. And I might ask, what are some of those foundational myths of those 3 decades, from 1950 to 1980? Perhaps human dominance, perhaps insensitivity, conceit, perhaps the false security of nuclear weapons, certainly emotional ignorance. So I turn to you, seniors, and ask, what will be your defining story in your times, now, here in the 21st century? What things won't sit right with you? What nuggets of discontent are you holding? What questions will fuel your life? Well, as Willem said, things have a funny way of turning out. And one snowy Sunday afternoon, I stumbled across a book by Krishnamurti, and a strange series of synchronous events fell into my lap, and doors opened and doors closed, and the sense of absurdity inherent in large bureaucratic school systems had continued to get under my skin, and I finally had the wherewithal. I finally had the confidence and the resourcefulness to say, I'm out of here. And I left Minneapolis. That chapter was closed, and I decided to move to Ojai. And the rest is history. So, before I close, I'd like to offer one sketch of working with Krishnamurti from the early years. I recall several conversations with parents and staff when he would get a subtle but definite twinkle of delight in his eye. And it was usually when somebody had backed themselves into a corner during a discussion. And it was that their intellect was operating high speed and they were trying to figure it out. And Krishnamurti would just laugh, sit there and look at somebody kind of stumbling along. And he'd say, don't move away. Be confused. See what happens. Tangling with an impossible question might very well be the invitation that the mind needs to shut down, to crack open the heart of true intelligence, love, and perception. Well, those conversations with Krishnamurti about schools, life, conditioning were the most refreshing conversations I've ever had in my life. I learned the value of ignorance, the art of finding a good question, the beauty of listening and learning. And though I've held 6 different positions over the years here, I've always felt happy, creative, supported, and inspired. It's a true gift. And though absurdities still exist, of course, it's a school. You got 50 staff and hundreds of parents and hundreds of kids. There's plenty of absurdity. But when something doesn't sit right, thankfully, I've been in this community where asking questions has been part of the everyday territory. So we've danced together all these decades, asking what does it mean to educate our children in the modern world without selling them to the market economy. And as we're gathered here tonight, we cannot ignore the bigger picture. There are other teens in the world whose lives have been shortchanged, stunted from neglect or poor nutrition, debilitated or cut short from other nightmares. And our grief for them are as real and as natural as water, as genuine as our tears of joy for you all. So, we send you, dear graduates, from our nest, and we wonder how the values that have instilled here as our community will sustain you. But when it comes down to it, There's no school, no map, no compass, no diploma. No diploma that will provide direction for your life. Your life will unfold with your choices, your actions, your open hearts. It will reveal itself every day. And when thunder comes, no umbrella will protect you except the umbrella of a deep, abiding intelligence.